My husband's family secretly hated me, then needed my money to survive. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I should have noticed the way their smiles never reached their eyes. Every time I walked into my husband's parents' house, his mother would greet me with a kiss on the cheek, but her lips would barely brush my skin, cold and perfunctory. His sister would glance at me, quickly sizing up my clothes, my hair, my very presence, before turning away with a dismissive laugh. His father, well, he rarely even bothered with pleasantries. At first, I convinced myself it was nerves. They didn't know me yet. Maybe they just needed time. But months turned into years, and still, their disdain leaked through the cracks of every interaction. They invited me to dinners, but conversations always flowed around me, never to me. My jokes were ignored, my stories dismissed, and sometimes, I could have sworn I caught them whispering behind closed doors when they thought I wasn't listening. It hurt. God, it hurt. But I told myself love meant compromise. My husband adored me, and if being with him meant enduring the occasional slight from his family, then fine. I'd swallow the bitterness and smile. Still, some moments stung sharper than others. Like the time his sister leaned across the table and said, "You must be so glad he married you. I mean, given where you come from." The words were dipped in sugar, but they sliced me clean open. Or the night his mother pulled him aside, whispering too loudly, "She'll never fit in here." But nothing could have prepared me for the night the facade completely crumbled. We were sitting at that same dinner table, the one where I had endured years of veiled insults, when his mother cleared her throat and said, "We need to talk." Her hands trembled as she set down her glass of wine, and for the first time in my life, I saw something different in her eyes, desperation. "Your father's business has collapsed," she admitted, voice low, but every syllable heavy with shame. "We're drowning. We need help." Her gaze shifted, finally meeting mine, really meeting mine. But this time, it wasn't disdain that flashed across her face. It was hunger. And then it clicked. The years of coldness, the whispered conversations, the quiet exclusion, none of it had been random. They hadn't just disliked me. They had been hiding something, protecting an image that was crumbling from the inside out. And now, the same family that had made me feel like an outsider was about to ask me for the very thing they once mocked me for having: money. As the silence hung heavy around the table, I felt my stomach twist. For years, I thought their hatred was personal. But in that moment, I realized it was something else entirely. Something darker. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. After that dinner, things shifted in ways I never thought possible. Suddenly, the same people who once couldn't hide their disdain for me were calling me almost daily. His mother's voice, once sharp and judgmental, now carried a syrupy sweetness that felt entirely fake. His sister, who had barely acknowledged my existence before, sent me long texts sprinkled with heart emojis and questions about my amazing career. Even his father, the most distant of them all, started asking if I might have connections that could help salvage what was left of their crumbling empire. It was jarring. For years, I had been treated like an outsider, someone they merely tolerated because their precious son had chosen me. And now, I was suddenly the center of their attention, as though I had been part of their inner circle all along. I knew why, of course. They had discovered that I wasn't just the woman who wasn't good enough for their son. I was also financially secure in a way they weren't. I had built my own business from the ground up, weathered setbacks, and come out stronger. What they didn't realize was how much blood, sweat, and sacrifice had gone into my success. To them, my stability was just a convenient resource, something to drain. One afternoon, his mother invited me over for tea. It was the first time she had ever wanted to see me alone, without her son present. I sat across from her at the polished oak table, the same table where I had endured countless humiliations, and watched as she placed her hand gently over mine. "You're part of this family," she said, her tone practiced, almost theatrical. "And families take care of each other in hard times." I smiled politely, but inside, I was burning. Where was this talk of family when I had spent holidays crying in the bathroom because of their cruel remarks? Where was this unity when they whispered behind my back, making sure I never felt welcome? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "We're not asking for much. Just a loan. Enough to keep us afloat until we get back on our feet." I looked her in the eyes, And for the first time, I didn't see a woman who disliked me. I saw someone who was drowning, and who was perfectly willing to drag me under with her if it meant she could breathe a little longer. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I sipped my tea, feeling the weight of years of resentment pressing down on my chest. In that moment, I realized something chilling. Their hatred had never truly disappeared. It had only been replaced by desperation. And desperation, I knew, could be far more dangerous than open disdain. After that tea with his mother, I started noticing things I had overlooked before. Whispers when I walked into the room, the abrupt silences at family gatherings, the way conversations seemed to shift the moment I appeared. They thought they were subtle, but years of being the outsider had sharpened my instincts. One evening, while helping clear the dinner table at their house, I stepped into the hallway to grab my bag. That's when I heard his sister's voice drifting from the kitchen. "She'll give in," she said, her tone dripping with certainty. "She loves him too much to say no. And if she doesn't," her voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. I froze, my stomach tightening. She wasn't talking about me as a family member, not even as a person. I was a strategy, a financial safety net they felt entitled to. Later that night, I told my husband what I had overheard. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They don't mean it like that," he insisted. "They're just stressed. You know how my family gets when they're under pressure." But I didn't know. I knew exactly how they got. They attacked. They judged. And now, instead of tearing me down emotionally, they were preparing to drain me financially. What unsettled me most wasn't just their behavior. It was his reaction. Instead of being shocked or angry, he seemed almost resigned, as if he had expected this from them all along, as if part of him agreed with them. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my husband asleep beside me, and the truth dug its claws into me. Their hatred had never been about me personally. It had always been about control, control over him, control over appearances, and now, control over me through my money. The realization terrified me, because if they were desperate enough to come to me now, after years of barely concealing their disdain, what else were they willing to do if I refused? The next family dinner confirmed what I had feared. It started as always, a stiff embrace from my mother-in-law, a forced smile from his sister, the kind of polite small talk that feels more like a transaction than a conversation. But as the night wore on, their masks began to slip. His mother leaned across the table, her voice sweet but laced with poison. "You know, dear, not everyone gets the luxury of marrying into comfort. Some of us have to fight to keep our homes, our businesses, our dignity." Her eyes flicked toward me with a sharpness I couldn't ignore. I forced a smile, but my pulse quickened. They weren't even pretending anymore. Later, while clearing dishes, his sister cornered me near the sink. "You're lucky," she whispered, her tone venomous. "Lucky he chose you. Lucky you have the kind of money that can keep things afloat when times get tough." I froze, the plate trembling in my hand. She smirked at my silence, as if she had won some invisible battle, before gliding back into the dining room. When I returned, I caught my husband looking at me with a tension I hadn't seen before, like he knew exactly what was happening, but didn't dare stop it. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter that wasn't real and conversations that felt like traps. Every word carried weight. Every glance reminded me. I was not one of them, not truly. I was an outsider with a wallet, nothing more. By the time we left, I was shaking. In the car, I demanded answers. Why are they acting like this? Why are they talking about my money as if it's theirs? He gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight. "They're under a lot of pressure. You wouldn't understand." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not we, they. He had chosen his side without even realizing it. That was the night I stopped pretending. Their hatred wasn't hidden anymore, and neither was their desperation. Something was breaking, and it wasn't just my trust in his family. It was my trust in him. A week later, the cracks widened. I had gone upstairs to grab my coat after another long evening at his parents' house. As I passed the study, I heard muffled voices, low, urgent, and unmistakably about me. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding. "She doesn't even realize," his mother's voice hissed. "He married her for stability. Without her, we'd all be drowning. And she thinks she's family?" His sister laughed softly, cruelly. "She'll never be one of us. But if she's smart, she'll keep funding the little empire. Otherwise, he'll regret choosing her." I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles ached. The words cut deeper than any argument ever could. I wasn't just unwanted. I was a transaction, a lifeline they tolerated for survival. The sound of footsteps jolted me, and I hurried back down the stairs, my face burning. By the time my husband joined me at the door, I had smoothed my expression into something resembling calm. On the ride home, I couldn't stop replaying their voices. When I finally asked him about it, carefully, cautiously, he sighed, like I was being dramatic. They're protective. It's not personal, he said, staring at the road. They've always been intense. You can't take it to heart. But it was personal. Every word, every glance, every whispered conversation had my name written all over it. And worse, I was beginning to wonder if he knew the truth all along. That night, lying awake beside him, I realized something. Their hatred was only half the story. The other half, the desperation, the fixation on my money, hinted at a bigger secret. Something rotten was festering beneath their polished family dinners and brittle smiles. I didn't know what it was yet, but one thing was certain. They needed me. And need, I was beginning to understand, can turn people into monsters. I thought I could tuck their words into the back of my mind, but they gnawed at me like termites eating through wood. Every look my husband gave me, every sigh, every dismissal began to feel heavier. At first, I convinced myself he just didn't want to admit how cruel his family really was. But then, small things started to surface. He'd come home with unexplained expenses, dinners I wasn't invited to, emergency cash withdrawals, vague excuses about helping out his mother. One evening, after another strained dinner where his sister had all but rolled her eyes at everything I said, I finally broke down. Why do they hate me? I asked him as we pulled into our driveway. My voice cracked in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just sat in the car, staring through the windshield like the question was a burden he didn't want to carry. Finally, he said quietly, "They don't hate you. They just think you'll never understand what we've been through." What does that even mean? I shot back. They whisper about me when they think I'm not listening. They treat me like I'm an outsider. And you? I stopped, my throat tightening. You let them. He rubbed his face with his hands, weary. You wouldn't get it. You didn't grow up like us. That sentence lingered long after we went inside. You didn't grow up like us. It was more than defensiveness. It was an admission. Something about their past bound them together, a secret I was deliberately being kept away from. That night, while he showered, I searched through his phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through messages from his sister and mother. One thread made my stomach churn. Sister, does she suspect? Him, no. She just thinks they're being cold. Mother, good. We need more time. I locked the phone and sat frozen, while rising in my throat. More time for what? Whatever they were hiding, I was now sure of one thing. My husband wasn't just turning a blind eye. He was part of it. The discovery of those messages kept me awake all night. I lay next to him, watching his chest rise and fall in sleep, while my mind raced. More time for what? The phrase replayed like a haunting melody, refusing to let me rest. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay passive anymore. I needed proof, something tangible that explained their hostility and their whispers. When he left for work, I walked into his office. It was the one place in the house he guarded fiercely, always insisting he needed privacy for bills and taxes. My hands shook as I opened drawers and sifted through files. Most of it was mundane, old receipts, tax documents, insurance forms. Then I found it. An old ledger, worn at the edges, its pages filled with careful handwriting. At first, I thought it was just some budgeting exercise. But as I read, my blood turned cold. There were lists of transactions, loans, repayments, and then red lines where repayments had never been made. And beside those lines, initials. Not mine. Not even his. They were his family's. His mother. His sister. His brother. And then I saw my name, scribbled beside a column labeled Assets. A note in his handwriting. Her savings. Accessible if convinced. I sank into his chair, clutching the ledger. So that was it. I wasn't hated because of who I was. I was hated because of what I had. To them, I was nothing more than a bank account in disguise, an opportunity. When I heard the garage door, I panicked and shoved the ledger back where I found it. He walked in, smiling faintly, but his eyes darted toward the office. His instincts were sharp. I could see suspicion flash across his face. "Everything okay?" he asked casually, though his tone carried an edge. I forced a smile. Of course. Why? He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to read my mind. Then he kissed my forehead and muttered, "Good. Don't worry about things that aren't yours to worry about." But in that instant, I knew he was lying. And worse, he knew I was onto him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ledger burned in my memory, every line carving deeper into my chest. My savings, my hard-earned independence, reduced to a casual note in his handwriting. Something to be convinced out of me. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Phone calls taken in hushed tones. The way his mother's eyes flickered toward me at family dinners, not with disdain, but with calculation. The awkward silences that fell whenever I entered a room. It wasn't just dislike, it was strategy. One evening, after another uncomfortable dinner at his mother's house, I lingered in the hallway as he said goodbye. Their voices carried from the kitchen, muffled but clear enough. "She's stubborn," his mother whispered. "But she'll break. You always knew how to guide her." Guide me? My stomach dropped. His voice came next, low and firm. "Just give me time. She trusts me. She won't say no when the moment comes." I backed away before they saw me, my hands trembling. My marriage wasn't a marriage. It was a long con. When we got home, he acted as if nothing had happened. He poured me a glass of wine, kissed me softly, and asked about my day. I played along, but inside, I was screaming. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face looked hollow, haunted. I whispered to myself, "They want to break me. They think I'll bend. But I won't." The next morning, I made a decision. If they saw me as a pawn, I would flip the board. If they thought they could use my money to survive, they were about to learn what it meant to underestimate me. But I needed to move carefully. One wrong step, and they'd know I was onto them. So I smiled, I laughed, I pretended. All the while I planned. And as I tucked myself into bed, I realized, for the first time in months, I felt something sharper than fear. I felt power. I began watching everything with new eyes. Every phone call he took, every text he tried to hide, every casual comment his mother dropped, it all became pieces of a puzzle. They thought I was still naive, but inside, I was documenting everything. At work, I secretly opened a new savings account. I started funneling my freelance earnings there, away from the account he could see. It wasn't much, but it gave me a sense of control. Meanwhile, I carefully staged my expressions at home. Smiles when they spoke about family investments, polite nods when his sister dropped hints about shared responsibilities. I had to let them believe I was pliable. One evening, his brother cornered me after dinner. He leaned in, his tone dripping with fake warmth. "You know," he said, "you're practically one of us. If you really want to show your love for the family, you'll help us through this rough patch. It's what a good wife does." I forced a laugh. Of course. Family always helps family. He grinned, satisfied. But inside, I was shaking, not with fear, but with fury. Later that night, I overheard another conversation, this time between my husband and his mother. "She's almost there," his mother said. "Once she transfers the money, we'll be safe. After that, she won't matter." Those words pierced me like knives. She won't matter. I realized then that they didn't just want my money. They wanted me erased, my worth reduced to a bank account, my existence disposable. That was the moment my plan sharpened. If they wanted my money so badly, I would let them reach for it. But what they grabbed wouldn't be salvation, it would be their undoing. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely, though no one saw it. They thought I was trapped, but the truth was, I was setting the trap for them. The mask slipped faster than I expected. One Sunday afternoon, during what was supposed to be a casual family lunch, my mother-in-law set down her fork, folded her hands, and looked me dead in the eye. "We need your help," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "This family has always supported you, and now it's time for you to give back. A wife's duty is to stand by her husband, no matter the sacrifice." The table went quiet. His sister smirked, his brother leaned back smugly, and my husband, sat there without a word, his silence louder than any declaration. I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked evenly, "What kind of help?" His mother didn't flinch. "We need financial support. The business is collapsing. If you truly care about this family, you'll use your savings to keep us afloat." I looked at my husband, desperate for him to defend me, to say this wasn't fair. Instead, he said softly, "It's not just about money. It's about loyalty. They're my family, and by extension, they're yours. The air thickened, pressing against me. I realized, in that moment, that I was completely alone at that table. I forced a smile, though inside I was breaking. Of course, I said lightly. I'll think about it. Relief washed over their faces. They thought they had won. They thought I was pliable, just like always. But as I sat there, nodding along, I could feel something shift inside me. I was done begging for their acceptance, done being manipulated. I wasn't going to save them. I was going to let them destroy themselves, and I'd make sure the world saw it happen. A few days later, when I thought the house was finally quiet, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find my husband's younger cousin, Emily, shifting nervously on the porch. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping inside, lowering her voice. "You don't know me well," she said quickly, "but I know enough about you and about them. You need to be careful." My chest tightened. Careful about what? She hesitated, twisting her hands. "They don't just want your money to save the business. They've been talking for years, ever since you married in. They always knew you were successful, independent, valuable. You were never part of the family. They just saw you as a safety net. A bank account with a smile." Her words landed like punches. It confirmed everything I'd feared, but hearing it from someone inside their circle made it undeniable. I whispered, "Why are you telling me this?" Her eyes hardened. "Because they'll ruin you if you let them. They'll drain you dry and spit you out. They've already started planning how to manipulate you. If you resist, they'll use your husband to pressure you. And if that doesn't work, they'll find another way." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, another way?" Emily swallowed, glancing again toward the door. "They're not above lies. Or destruction. Just be ready." Then she was gone, leaving me standing in the silence of my own home, heart pounding, mind racing. For the first time, I wasn't just angry, I was terrified. Not just of losing money, but of losing myself. And yet, beneath the fear, a new spark ignited. If they thought I was an easy target, they were about to discover how dangerous I could be. After Emily's warning, I started paying closer attention to every glance, every word exchanged between my husband's family. And once I looked past the polite smiles, I saw it all. The mask was slipping. At Sunday dinner, my mother-in-law poured me wine with her usual too-sweet grin. "We're so lucky to have you, dear," she said. But her eyes flicked to my husband, as though testing whether he'd catch the hidden meaning. Later, I overheard his older brother whispering in the kitchen, "She won't say no? She can't. Not with how much she loves him." The words chilled me. They weren't talking about family bonds. They were talking about leverage. When I confronted my husband afterward, he looked cornered. "They're just worried," he muttered. "Don't take it the wrong way." But I couldn't unhear the calculation in his brother's voice, or the silence that followed every time I walked into the room. The turning point came one night when my husband left his phone on the table. A message popped up from his mother. "She'll give in soon. Just keep reminding her it's for the family. She won't let you down." My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't love. It wasn't respect. It was a plot. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like prey. And prey, once cornered, has two choices: surrender or fight back. The moment I read that message, something inside me shifted. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was truth, staring me right in the face. My husband's family had never accepted me, but now I understood why. To them, I was never a person. I was a resource. I watched my husband that night as he scrolled through his phone, pretending nothing was wrong. His jaw tightened whenever he read a new message. I realized then that he wasn't just a bystander. He was their messenger, their bridge, the one softening me up for the inevitable demand. When I asked him directly, "Are you working with them behind my back?" he froze. His silence said more than words ever could. "I thought we were a team," I whispered, my voice breaking. He finally looked at me, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You don't understand. They've lost everything. If we don't help them, they'll sink. And if they sink, I'll go down with them." There it was. His loyalty had never been divided. It was firmly with them. I had married not just a man, but an entire family that saw me as their lifeline. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of betrayal pressed on me, heavier than any insult or cold glance ever had. I wasn't just fighting against a toxic mother-in-law or scheming siblings. I was up against my own husband. But if they thought I would roll over, they had underestimated me. For the first time, I began to imagine not what they wanted from me, but what I could do with the power they didn't even realize I held. The next morning, I looked at my husband differently. He wasn't my partner anymore. He was a pawn in their game. And if I wanted to win, I needed to start playing smarter than all of them combined. I began by acting as though nothing had changed. I smiled at him over breakfast, kissed his cheek before he left for work, even asked how his mother was doing when she called. Inside, though, I was cataloging every move, every word, every slip he made. It wasn't hard to see the patterns once I paid attention. His phone always buzzed after we discussed finances, and his siblings always seemed to drop by right after he mentioned something about my savings. It was like watching vultures circle, waiting for me to collapse. That evening, I made a decision. If they wanted my money so badly, I would give them a taste of it, but on my terms. I drafted fake bank statements showing I had transferred a significant sum into a family support account. I even printed receipts with convincing logos. When my husband accidentally saw the paperwork on the kitchen counter, his eyes lit up in relief. He didn't even question it, just rushed to text someone. I knew exactly who. I smiled to myself, feeling the first flicker of power in weeks. They thought they had trapped me, but soon they would discover that the woman they dismissed as an outsider had teeth sharp enough to tear their entire facade apart. The trap was set, and now it was only a matter of waiting. My husband's family believed the money was already sitting in an account, ripe for their taking. What they didn't know was that every detail, the transfers, the receipts, even the bank account number, was carefully fabricated. Within days, the mask slipped. His mother invited me over for tea, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. The moment I sat down, her tone hardened. She demanded access to the account, insisting the family needed immediate help. Her words were sharp, her entitlement suffocating. I've sacrificed too much for this family to watch it fall apart, she hissed. If you truly love my son, you'll prove it now. I leaned back in my chair, studying the desperation in her eyes. This wasn't about love. This was about power and survival. I slid the forged documents across the table, letting her believe I had given them everything they wanted. She snatched them up greedily, already calling one of her other children to prepare the withdrawal. What she didn't know was that when they marched into the bank the next morning, armed with their arrogance, they would discover nothing but smoke and mirrors. Their fraud, their lies, their endless greed, every bit of it would come crashing down in public humiliation. And I would be waiting for the fallout, stronger than they had ever imagined.